As Suleiman walked through the blossoming peach trees in his palace gardens, his mind drifted back to the defining moments of his early reign. The rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze was a stark contrast to the clamor of war that had filled his ears during those first campaigns. The weight of history pressed upon his shoulders, but he carried it with the certainty of a ruler destined for greatness. The opportunity for conquest had first presented itself with the murder of his messenger to Hungary. It was a blatant insult, one that could not go unanswered. More than mere retribution, it was a chance to erase a lingering stain on Ottoman history, the retreat of his illustrious predecessor, Mehmed II, from Belgrade. Suleiman, however, would not suffer such a fate. If Belgrade fell, the road to Buda and Vienna would be open, and an Ottoman-dominated Europe would no longer be a distant dream, but a tangible reality. Everything was in his favor. As he conversed with his trusted friend and Grand Vizier, Ibrahim Pasha, he absorbed the latest intelligence from Europe. Unlike the legendary Hungarian leaders of the past, John Hunyadi, who had bested the Ottomans in battle, or Matthias Corvinus, whose disciplined rule had fortified Hungary, his current adversary was weak. The Hungarian monarchy had crumbled into a state of disorder. Their kings were elected, and rather than choosing a strong leader to guide them, the nobles had opted for a boy of 14, too inexperienced to command respect, too malleable to impose order. Internal strife plagued the kingdom. The once mighty force that had defied the Ottomans now stood divided and leaderless. Yet, it was not only Hungary that had changed. The entire Christian world was in turmoil. Suleiman had eyes and ears across Europe, and what he learned assured him that his path forward would be unimpeded. When Hungary's young king sought assistance from the Holy Roman Emperor at the Diet of Worms, his pleas were lost amid a far greater crisis. A rebellious priest named Martin Luther had nailed a document to a church door, challenging the authority of the Pope himself. This audacious act had splintered Christendom, dividing it into warring factions. Religious strife now consumed Europe. They were more preoccupied with their own theological disputes than with the advancing Ottoman forces. The German princes, once defenders of the Christian faith, had no inclination to march to Hungary's aid. The Pope, faced with the rise of Protestantism, was too distracted to rally a crusade against the Ottomans. Meanwhile, Charles V, the Habsburg ruler of Spain and the Holy Roman Empire, was embroiled in territorial conflicts with Francis I of France. The two most powerful Christian monarchs were locked in a struggle for dominance in Italy, leaving them little time to concern themselves with Suleiman's ambitions. The French, ever eager to undermine their Habsburg rivals, saw in the Ottomans a useful counterbalance. They would not raise a hand to stop him. The last potential obstacle was Venice, but the Republic's merchants prized their trade agreements with the Ottoman Empire too highly to risk war. The young Hungarian king would stand alone. Suleiman, however, was not one to underestimate an enemy, even a weak one. He spent the winter meticulously planning. Alongside Ibrahim and his other advisors, he orchestrated every detail. The movement of troops, the logistics of supply lines, and the coordination of separate armies converging toward a single objective. Nothing was left to chance. At last, the day of departure arrived. He vividly recalled that crisp February morning when his grand army assembled in Istanbul. Thousands of silk-clad cavalrymen and janissaries, their disciplined ranks stretching endlessly down the streets, made for an awe-inspiring spectacle. The march northward was swift, his forces swelling with each passing day as additional armies joined the campaign. Streams of soldiers became a river, then a torrent, surging toward Belgrade. His Grand Vizier reached the city first, but it was Suleiman's mighty cannons that truly began the siege. For weeks, the great guns bombarded Belgrade's formidable walls, but even their relentless fire made little impact. Treachery provided the next opportunity. An insider revealed a way to undermine the fortress's great tower. Still, the Hungarian defenders held firm. Then, fortune turned in Suleiman's favor. The Serbian Orthodox soldiers within the garrison, resentful of their Catholic Hungarian overlords, secretly offered to surrender in exchange for safe passage. Suleiman, a man of his word, granted them their lives and resettled them near Istanbul. The Hungarian defenders, however, were shown no mercy. The city was his. He ordered its grand church converted into a mosque and personally led the first Friday prayer within its walls. With Belgrade conquered, the path into Europe lay open. But before he could march further west, another thorn in the empire's side had to be dealt with: the Knights of Rhodes. For years, these Christian warriors had harassed Ottoman ships and resisted every attempt to oust them from their island stronghold. Now, Suleiman would bring the full weight of his empire against them. Europe was still too preoccupied to intervene. The French, the only power with a navy formidable enough to help, had squandered their fleet in battles against Spain. The Knights of Rhodes would stand alone. Suleiman dispatched a fleet of 300 ships and an army of 100,000 men. On the shores opposite Rhodes, he constructed a castle and positioned 100 cannons, some so massive that they could fire boulders. Before beginning the siege, he followed protocol, offering the Grand Master of the Knights a chance to surrender peacefully. As expected, the offer was refused. The siege commenced with an earth-shaking barrage from all 100 cannons. Smoke and the acrid scent of gunpowder filled the air as his forces stormed the walls. Yet, unlike the undisciplined Hungarian nobles, these knights fought with the rigid discipline of janissaries. The English and German defenders repelled wave after wave of assaults. Growing frustrated, Suleiman ordered tunnels dug beneath the walls, collapsing entire sections in explosions of stone and fire. Still, the defenders held. Infuriated, he executed Ayaz Pasha, one of his commanders, for failing to break through. Then he turned his wrath on his brother-in-law, Mustafa Pasha, demoting him to a distant governorship in Egypt. The relentless fighting drained his forces. Thousands had fallen to wounds and disease. Finally, he offered the knights a second chance to surrender, warning that refusal would lead to the complete extermination of Rhodes' population. Their response was defiant. They sent a letter signed by his grandfather, Bayezid II, promising them sovereignty. Enraged, Suleiman tore the letter apart and sent back envoys with mutilated prisoners, a gruesome sign of what awaited the defenders. The cannons resumed their unrelenting assault. A week later, the Grand Master finally capitulated. In victory, Suleiman chose magnanimity. The knights were permitted to leave with their arms and treasures. The citizens could depart if they wished, and those who stayed would enjoy religious freedom. For 5 years, they would be exempt from taxes and the dreaded child levy. As the defeated knights marched past, Suleiman met their aging leader. Though he had crushed them, he respected their bravery. Such is the fate of princes, he told the Grand Master. There is no shame in falling when 7,000 stand against 100,000. With Rhodes and Belgrade secured, his dominion expanded. 2 years of unrelenting war had solidified his power. Now, at last, he could return to Istanbul, where peace and governance awaited, for a time at least. The future still held greater conquests, and Suleiman was not one to remain idle for long.